you will be misunderstood. And so it's important that we understand how narratives function in today's world, how they function in the brain, and really the brain of our listeners and our audiences, so that we can best communicate an idea to them.
Welcome to the show, Rene Rodriguez.
Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here, Raquel. Thank you.
I have been waiting for this interview because I know that this episode is so needed, and I know that people are going to re-listen to this over and over. And I'm excited to have this conversation because one of the things I know about communication is it's super vital, whether it's in your personal or your business. And you're somebody that studies communication at such a high level. And why do you think effective communication is more important today than ever and is often described as one of the cornerstones of personal and professional success?
So let's go back to what the essence of communication is. It's at the core of the human experience. Two people together conversing, sharing an idea from one to another. Maybe it's one idea for survival. Maybe it's one of, a romantic relationship. Maybe it's one of a business relationship. Maybe it's just passing somebody in the street needing information. I go back to the beginning of time, that the ability to communicate was the first thing that sort of dictated your ability to survive. And now we're in a place where communication has advanced so far. I mean, we carry these devices that are portals to us 24/7 with ways to communicate: video, text, email, audio, humor, just at the touch of a button to be able to get access to us. And there's so many, this is such an incredible topic right now, that there's ways to miscommunicate easily. There's ways to enhance the communication. There's ways to add music and emotion to the communication. And there are people that abuse the communication to use all of that against us. And so right now, the ability to understand it is critical. The need and the requirement to be able to leverage it, to be able to get your message across, is even more critical because now there's so many voices competing for this attention. But as leaders and the people that you talk to and the people listening to this, you've got to be able to communicate to an audience to be able to understand what your value proposition is to the world, to recruit people to follow you. So, we can go on and on. It's everything.
It's everything. And so you talked about like some of the mistakes, like you could misuse it, you could abuse it, right? But what are some of the mistakes the entrepreneurs make when it comes to communication in today's world?
The biggest one is they make assumptions. They make assumptions that their common sense is passed from them onto someone else, or that they're operating from the same principles of assumption, or maybe even what we call the frame. And so the mistake in what we call the narrative gaps that are happening in the communication, and I think you've seen me do this, where I'll be on stage and I'll pause like that. And, even in a podcast, it's almost like you create that dead space. It's scary. But on stage, I'll stop and I'll walk off stage and in the middle of a sentence, and people will look and be like, what happened? And you wait. And for all of a sudden you see the stress level rise. And then people start making assumptions. Oh, did he have to go pee? Did something happen? Is he going to beat up the guy in the back? What's going on? Something happened. And all of the stress happens because they don't know what's happening. And the stress is happening because they're searching for some sort of filler for this voided space, this open loop that just was created. And I do that to illustrate how the brain needs sort of this continual narrative, this continual story to operate and to understand why we function. And when you create a gap in that, the brain begins to fill it with whatever it has access to. And usually it's its own past experience. And so if a leader doesn't show up to a meeting and doesn't communicate why, well, the people will make up their own reasons. And if you leave a message that's not fully crafted, or maybe use language that triggers other sorts of emotions and thoughts, people will fill in the blanks for you and you will be misunderstood. And so it's important that we understand how narratives function in today's world, how they function in the brain, and really the brain of our listeners and our audiences, so that we can best communicate an idea to them.
That is so good. I love the narrative gap. And I'm sure, that was one thing that even through that workshop that I learned a ton of filling the story, or like making up whatever you forgot to communicate. And today there's so many ways to communicate, whether it's on email, right? Text, meeting with your team members, or even on social. What would you say are 3 tips for being an effective communicator today?
Well, I think light travels faster than sound. And so people need to understand that the way they appear in their body language, the nonverbals, are going to send a message first, right? So let's just start with basics, learning to smile, right? I sometimes get very serious when I talk about stuff, so I forget to smile, but I think you know me even personally. I like to joke around. I'm pretty laid back, but for some reason, when I start working, I get very, very serious. But having a good smile and posture, right? Because this is going to dictate how you carry yourself. Your body is an expression of the mind. And so people are naturally going to look at how you stand. Do you stand in an insecure fashion? Are you closed off? Are you open? Do you walk up and smile at people? All of those indicate a sense of confidence, ability to trust or not trust, a like or dislike, attraction or repulsion. There's all sorts of things that are communicated non-verbally through body language. And people don't have to be experts to read it. So you're giving off body language, you're also receiving those signals from other people. And so one, to build the self-awareness around what am I giving off, one, and is it congruent with what I'm trying to say? If I'm excited, do I appear excited, or am I just saying I'm excited with no excitement in my voice, right? And so being able to make sure that those are congruent. So that's a body language piece that would probably be first. And then to understand the importance and the role of story and narrative, because there's a story to everything. And when I say story, I'm not always referring to once upon a time. Sometimes the story is, well, when you first asked me to be on your show, Raquel, my first thought was absolutely, because I think what you're doing is so critical to leadership in the space that you're in, especially, another strong female that's out there doing stuff. And so now I'm already giving a narrative of how we met and how this progressed to here. That's a story and that's a narrative that creates context to something. Or even if you're in a business meeting and you can talk about, the narrative of how you got to somewhere, or even just using the narrative of some sort of prop or some sort of visual aid to bring life to a message. All of that is in story. And I'd say the third part is to end everything with this magic phrase of what this means to you is, or the reason I share that with you is this. And that comes back to what we call the tie down. But I learned this lesson when I was 18 years old. The most important phrase in selling or persuasion is, and it has to follow a story, a statistic, a feature, or something, is what this means to you is this. And if you can't answer what this means to you, or the reason I share this with you, then it's probably something you haven't thought about enough yet. You have to be able to tailor that message into what is important to the listener, and tailor it so it meets them specifically where they're at. So I'd say those three.
You talk about body language, and in today's age, there's a lot of meetings that happen over video, even this podcast that's being recorded. How does that impact, because you can't see the whole body, and you can't always see all the emotions as if you were in person or on stage. What would you say when people are doing Zoom meetings that they should really pay attention to?
That's a great question. And I remember people thinking, oh, this is going to go away. Zoom's going to go away. It's not. It's enhancing. I mean, what went away were phone calls. The thought of a phone call, it just makes no sense to me anymore. Let's Zoom. I mean, I can see the face. I can at least get more of the communication. So the thing to understand is that, one, connection can happen via Zoom. Emotion can be transmitted via Zoom. It can be an engaging environment. No different than why we binge watch our favorite movies for 3 hours with our entire family. We'll binge watch our favorite TV shows that are episode upon episode. And it's just in this little box, but we're captivated, and our periphery goes away, and anything and only thing happens there. And so what we learned when we did this, because we were forced to do this after the NBA was canceled in 2020, I had 100 events booked that I had to cancel in 1 week. And so we were like, okay, we need to figure this out. I went and I spoke to Harvard. I talked to directors, writers, producers, actors, people that already had an experience of capturing attention on this little box. And we learned several different things. One is, the goal is, how do you battle disassociation, which means like a serial killer would disassociate from its victims. Well, we disassociate from people on Zoom when they're boring. And so we said, okay, well, what creates disassociation? Well, it's the lack of dopamine secretion and the lack of norepinephrine. So we need dopamine and norepinephrine. Those are the two things. We'll nerd out here for just a minute. So dopamine is created through novelty. So if I were to bring a prop on stage like the speaker, we have to be like the speaker. So now I've brought the screen alive. It's just not my face just talking like this and not moving, but I brought something. And if I bring something of color, like a lot of times in our meetings, we're going to have to measure success, right? In sales, we have to measure success. And so this now becomes a prop that's on the Zoom screen. Now I've added yellow and red. So your cornea and your retina are starting to trigger more colors, and it's moving. And so that secretes dopamine. And when we add a little tension, just like that, that's norepinephrine. So attention is created through dopamine and norepinephrine. So novelty and tension create attention. So we had to create that. The other piece was understanding where to put the camera. Like if you notice, like you and I both are lined up, right? Like we would be on TV. You don't see us, down here way in the corner, or, the camera is so high that it's looking up our nostril. I used to draw the word G and then GLE, draw Google with their nostrils on people that would just have the camera too low, or it was too high. And, they're looking up at the camera. There's all sorts of things. There was never standard design. But if you were to sit in an actual meeting, you'd sit eye level, the way you and I are eye level right now. And my camera is now I'm actually looking through a teleprompter. So I can see your face, and on the other side of your face is a camera. So we wanted to merge all of those different pieces. And the other piece would be lighting, right? So there's lighting on how do we do that. So you got camera, audio, lighting, and location. But the audio, if I just move my microphone off just by 6 inches, it changes the entire experience. Now I have this great lighting. I've got 23 lights on in here, $100,000 studio, but my microphone's off because I didn't have it in the sweet spot. And now this is where it's supposed to be. So a lot of people have microphones, but they don't use it right. So Zoom can be an engaging tool if you use all the pieces correctly.
One thing that we're seeing a lot and a trend a lot, especially on social media platforms, is the key thing is like video today. And there's a lot of people that are so afraid to get on video and communicate on video. What tips would you give to that entrepreneur that's listening right now when it comes to video and sharing your influence or sharing your message and sharing your voice?
Well, one is you're not going to be good right away, just like anything new. And stop that expectation. It's okay to not be good at something right away. And you don't have to have the most professional videos to make influential videos. But yet it does, over time, the professionalism will come with time. And so if you know that time and practice and repetition, you can't skip it in the learning of any skill, it's not any different in video. In the same way you'd be upset at your kids for trying something once or twice and saying, oh, I'm not good at it, or trying a food one time and you'd be like, oh, I don't like it. Well, you haven't tried it enough. It's the same thing as we get adults with doing video and social media. We're not going to be good at first, and that's okay. So I'd say number one, be okay with that. And if you're a sales manager, if it's like you're trying to get other people to learn new skills, you got to be willing to get out there. And it's not going to be simple. It's not going to be easy, but it's easier than you think. I promise you that. Picking up the camera and doing things, watching other people and what they're doing. There are formulas out there that you can follow to be able to do that. But just get out there first and just start creating something for people to watch.
Just do it, right? The good old just do it. You're going to suck at it and embrace the suck and you'll get better at it.
Yeah.
In your book, Amplify Your Influence. Influence is so much more than persuasion. And the art of influence is having the ability to make an impact. How does communication play a critical role, especially in leadership today?
The great John Maxwell said the truest measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And so if you are a leader, you should be a student, a lifelong student of influence, which is the ability to capture someone's attention first, and then have them act upon that attention and the message, right? So you've captured your attention, I've delivered a message, and you've acted upon it. That's influence. And so you have to understand that we're not entitled to people's attention. There's no, just because you show up doesn't mean people are going to pay attention, especially in the world of social media where they can just swipe their thumb and they got the next piece of content. And if they could swipe you as a leader, would they swipe you? Would they scroll right past you? And I was telling somebody, I said, this isn't new. This whole stop the scroll. It used to be stop the stroll. Think about it. The old newsstands. This is headline writing. People were strolling by and like, oh, what is that? Extra, read all about it. Or breaking news. And the first time you saw some of those in big headlines and big bold print and something to really just capture attention, that was been around since the beginning of print. And now it's stop the scroll. But well, what about now you have a captive audience? They're forced to listen to you. Okay, what are you going to offer? Are you going to be able to truly tell the story, capture their attention, inspire their hearts, mobilize them to take action towards something? Or are you just the leader and you're expecting them to pay attention? Well, it doesn't work in today's world. People will look for a different leader, and there's plenty of options.
Okay, so I'm going to switch gears to public speaking. One of the biggest fears that people have, and it's one of the most terrifying things. And how does somebody, you teach people all the time with communication. You teach them how to public speak, and I can't even believe that I went through your class and got all the recordings.
You killed it, by the way.
Because it was one of the most terrifying, but one of the experiences that you look back and go, it made me so much better today. Right. So how would you help somebody overcome public speaking today and help them build up confidence?
For sure. Well, I mean, it is one of the greatest fears, for sure. It's up there. And you have to understand that the fear and how the fear works, it's a stress response. And it's one that we're trying to be impressive. We want to come off a certain way, in the fear of ridicule, embarrassment. I mean, there's so many things that public speaking sort of exposes about ourselves that it's scary. And I get that it's scary. But I think what we need to do is reframe what it is that we're doing. I talk to people all the time that are really scared to speak in public, but then I ask them to do something that isn't in a persuasive or a self-promotional environment, and they do it just fine. And so when we switch the inner trigger of what it is, and it's always self-created, when we can switch that to an expressive mode, then all of a sudden it just changes. And the other piece too is to understand that polish does not equal influence. It does not equal influence at all. You can be overly polished. Yes, Raquel, thank you so much for being here or for having me on your show. And all of a sudden my voice changes and I'm trying to be polished. And you see people that are just so polished. You're like, okay, I mean, you might admire it and be impressed by it, but you can't connect with it. And so to me, I look for connection over impression. And so I know people like, that can be holding a glass and they're trembling. Mm-hmm. And people say, you got to calm that down before you can. No, you can tremble. But if I'm holding this glass and I say, I'm really excited to be here and my glass is shaking, and people aren't going to believe you because of incongruency. Your voice is saying I'm excited, but your body is saying that you are petrified. But if you make congruency and you hold the glass and yes, you're trembling and you just acknowledge this, you know what? Clearly, I'm extremely nervous to be here, as you can tell by my glass. But I wanted to say something anyways, because this group means a lot to me. And all of a sudden, it's congruent. And even though I'm trembling and it's not polished, I am connecting. That's the biggest myth, is that you have to be polished to be influential or to be a good public speaker. You don't. You just have to be congruent.
And that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I took away from your class or your workshop was the ability to connect, and you're there to make an impact and connect with people over what you truly say sometimes.
Yeah. And that's where we get into the reality that being able to speak in front of a group is a privilege. And the concept of ethos, or your credibility, too many people think they own their credibility, that it's theirs. Once I'm credible, it's mine. I say, well, no, the audience owns your credibility. They can take it away from you. And when you realize that, you enter the speaking world as a servant, and you realize I'm there to serve this audience that's giving me the privilege of their attention that they can take away at any point in time. And so I better be in touch with what their needs are. I better have done my homework. And the group that trusted me to be in front of the group and to say, I'm giving you my entire group's or company's attention for an hour or whatever it is, and then I better be ready to deliver some real value. Now that's pressure, which is where a lot of the stress comes in. But if you believe in what it is you're doing and you've done the work, yes, it will be nerve-wracking. And we tell people that the butterflies will never go away, but you can teach them to fly in formation. And that's usually through breathing, relaxation, mindfulness, all the things that too many people will make a punchline out of. I always tell people, the moment somebody laughs at mindfulness or meditation or breathing, I know that they've never faced a game-winning shot. They've never faced 3,000 eyeballs. They've never felt the pressure of something. And because they know that the secret weapon of the top performers, the elite, is breathing. And so they got to learn all those skills.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way. Breathing, breath work. I wish I would have incorporated that a long time ago, but it's just become something that, you pay attention to, and it really does calm a lot of things within your body. And as entrepreneurs, we have a million ideas, myself included, and sometimes we have a hard time communicating them. What would you say are some of the best practices when it comes to, communicating your ideas and getting others that you're communicating it with engage in your ideas? Because sometimes I go to these meetings and it's like one way. I don't know if you've ever been to those meetings where you've got the leader that is just probably like dictatorship to say, and they're communicating, this is their idea, but no, you can tell nobody's bought it.
Yeah, it's interesting. My mother used to always say, Rene, be careful what you're passionate about, because there's not much room for other people in your passion. And it dawned on me, she says, you got to make room for people in your passion. And that sort of changed a lot of how I looked at it, where it was, I'm so passionate about something, I'm not listening to somebody else, versus I'm passionate about it, but how do I open up this as the beginning to a conversation? Now, in different scenarios, sometimes, I always look at the skill sets that we teach are like clubs in a golf bag or tools in a toolbox. You have to assess the situation before you choose your club. You have to assess the situation before you choose the tool. And so, if you're in a situation where where consensus isn't an option, where you have to drive and lead, then there is a different tool to use. There's a different approach where you have to be decisive, but you better be leading and confident, and then probably should have earned trust from people prior to that happening. And so, but now if you're trying to be collaborative and you're trying to create some level of consensus and get people engaged and enrolled, then you have to be able to tap into their hearts. And their hearts, I always say the heart is three things. One is it's our values, it's our behavior, it's our belief system, and it's our memories. Because values and beliefs are formed at a very young age, and it takes memory to access those. And so you got to be able to understand that the heart is three things. And so knowing what drives the people that are working with me, who's in my audience, and what's important to them, and then being able to tap into the idea in the context of something that they already know. That's the power of metaphor. And it's like this, right? Imagine you're on a ship and you're at storm, right? That's kind of like our company right now. But we've got a good crew. And so be able to kind of give them something that they can hold on to, that they can buy into. And the importance of being able to create a vision for the outcome and being able to really articulate that requires the leader to have spent considerable time drawing out what the vision looks like. If they can't draw the vision, how can they expect their team to understand the vision? If they can't articulate it, how can anybody else follow? And that is not always easy, which is also why there aren't a lot of great leaders. That's why we call them great. They stand out from the others. They know the right story at the right time in the right context, and it just lands right there.
Speaking of story, how important is storytelling to communication?
It is. So think about it from this perspective. One, let's redefine story. Let's go back to ages 3 and 4. That's when a child understands that there's a concept called narrative. A narrative is a beginning, a middle, and an end. Dad's hungry, beginning. Walks to fridge, opens it up, middle. Closes fridge. He's not hungry anymore. End. So when hungry, follow that narrative. Open the fridge and find some food. And so now by age 9 to 13, we realize that those narratives are guided by certain values. Oh, boy looks scared and alone. Mom asks him, is he hungry? Does he want to eat? Middle. And boy seems happy. Okay, so I can be generous and offer my house and food. So generosity is an important value set. So if boy hungry, then offer food to eat. Now by age 21, we realize that those values aren't just situational. They apply to everything. It's not just seeing this little boy. It might be my partner or my friend or somebody else that I see that maybe it's not hungry with food, but maybe they're starving for information. And I could apply that in that situation. And so stories are powerful because right now, the research says that we spend about 50% of our waking hours daydreaming. And you think about that. So daydreaming is utilizing your prefrontal lobe as a future simulator to run simulations and if this, then that scenarios. And then we do that to kind of outline our day, what's going to happen to best prepare ourselves and avoid risk and any dangers, et cetera. And so if we're daydreaming, upwards of 50% of our waking hours, there's only 2 situations in which we should stop daydreaming. First one is somebody has a gun to our head, a life and death situation. We're not daydreaming, we're very present. The second scenario is when someone else is telling a story. And the reason, this is what's crazy, that we stop daydreaming is because the storyteller is daydreaming for us. But now, what's the implication of that? This is where it gets crazy. We use daydreams to create narratives. And narratives are what help us construct memories. They help us understand the world around us. That's the second job of the brain. First is to keep us alive. Second is to make sense of the world. And we do that through narrative. Mm-hmm. And if I then say, okay, the way I understand the world is through narrative, which really is my perception, which really is my reality, because narratives are constructs of reality. And I'm allowing you to tell a story and basically take up real estate and impart narratives to me. You're basically forming and shifting my reality if I buy into your story. And the brain doesn't know the difference between you telling a story and me sharing the story. And the example of that is, have you ever cried during a movie?
Yes. Lots
Yes, me too, right? I hate to break this to you, Raquel, but those are actors.
of.
It's not even real, right?
I thought it was
And yet,
real.
yeah, but here's the funny thing. We know intellectually that that's the case, but yet our brain still fires and triggers as if it's real, that we're the ones that lost the championship. We were the ones cheated on in the movie or the book or whatever it was. Like, you see all of those things and the brain thinks it's you in that. And so the power of story, it triggers. And so this, the final nerdy piece is, if you share bullet points, right? Here are the 17 reasons. Here are the 5 reasons to do something. Or here's our financial plan in 17 steps. You trigger 2 little parts of the brain called Broca's area and Wernicke's area. They're 2 tiny little specks in the brain. And their job is to decipher language, and that's it. But when you tell a story, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. But guess who else's brain lights up in the same way? Mine. And so now these 2 brains are lit up like Christmas trees. And they mirror each other. And it's basically what they call neural coupling. So like 2 people getting together as a couple. So these brains have coupled together. And now when they couple together, they mirror each other, but that's the beginning of rapport and where trust is built. And so storytelling creates neural coupling where people can now increase empathy and care. And now I can actually connect and trust. So yeah, storytelling is everything.
So good. I mean, that's one thing that I always have to improve on, because I love to cut my stories short. And I love how you always break down storytelling. And speaking of like tools and where the world is today with AI, how do you think AI, artificial intelligence, impacts the way we communicate in the future?
Well, assisted writing is not new. The Bible was written through pseudopictographers. These are people that wrote under pseudonyms, that went to the prophets and other people and said that maybe they weren't good writers, but they would listen and they'd write it up for them. So they were the AI of back then. And still today, you have ghostwriters, all sorts of assisted writing. So it's not new. So if you're a good writer and you like to read and you know what questions to ask, I think it's going to be an enhancement. It already is. I love it. I use it. I pretend it's my research assistant because I know the studies exist. I don't have the time to go grab those abstracts. And so I asked ChatGPT, will you please find that Michael Gazzaniga's work on split brain studies back in 1984? And, please reference the importance of how emotion crosses the corpus callosum. Now, if you didn't know all that information, you wouldn't know to ask that. And if I were to say, okay, and what has changed since 1984? And what are the implications today, specifically in mortgage and real estate? And then let's see what ChatGPT does. And all of a sudden, it's this creative relationship between me and all the information that's available out there. And so I think when you have knowledge and you're able to engage in it, I think it's going to be great. What I don't know and I don't like is people that use it to, let's say, not do the work. But then I can go against that. It's like somebody saying, well, you're cheating because you're using ChatGPT. I said, well, how'd you get here today? I drove. Well, you don't have wings or a car. You're supposed to walk. You cheater. You're supposed to walk. Well, that enhanced the time distance of travel. You went from here to there much faster. It's not cheating. It's an advancement. And so, it does require us to shift a little bit. I think if you engage in it in a way to help you be more creative and to help challenge you and to help coach you and for you to challenge it, I think it's going to be fantastic.
So good. There is a lot of things, as you guys can probably hear and listen on this episode, that Rene can talk about. He understands communication at such a high level, influence at such a high level. What are you excited that you're working on right now? What's next for Rene?
Oh man, there's so many things that are happening right now. Well, we have our AmpCon event coming up October 26th. I'm not sure when this comes out. That's on October 26th. We've got new products, our neuro leadership journey that we're doing. We've got our master classes. We've got our, what else is there? Things that are new. Our coaching program, ways that we're able to impact people that don't require me to travel as much, but yet still be able to take people on a really strong journey.
If you guys haven't ever taken a class or picked up his book, Amplify Your Influence, you definitely want to take a class from Rene, because you will be hooked. And I promise you, you'll leave that masterclass, that workshop, someone totally different, right? And where can people connect with you?
The easiest place would be Instagram. Learn with Rene, in that we do one video every single day. It's not a pitch. We're actually trying to get up to 3 now. So we've just kind of made the plan to get to 3 videos a day, which is, it's a big lift, but I'm excited. And hopefully we'll see some of these clips come out. We've been recording some of these clips off to the side. And so Learn with Rene, 1 to 3 new videos per day are going to be on there. Our website, meetwithrene.com. And those are the best ways.
Love it. And as we wrap up, there's always one question that I ask every guest on the show is, what does Rene do to play bigger in business or in life?
Surround myself with good people like you. That's the big piece, like trying to engage with people that push me. And I was literally on a call with Tom Ferry earlier today. And that guy asked me some of the hardest questions. And those questions they've got me frustrated in such a good way. And I'm sitting there, I started laughing. I'm like, of course you're going to ask me a question like this, man. I go, this is why you're Tom Ferry. And it was so good. But I think to continually surround yourself around people that will challenge you. And the moment you think you're playing big is the moment you're not. You got to be around people that make you feel like you have so much bigger that you can play. And when you do that, man, it's such a cool feeling to know that there's always more.
Oh, so well said. Rene, thank you so much for being on our show today. I appreciate your time. I know you are super busy and I value your friendship, your mentorship, and I am forever changed because of the workshop that you held. So thank you so much.
It is my honor, and we can do this anytime you want. This was very, very fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.